Thank you, David. Welcome to Pareja Unfiltered, where I talk to entrepreneurs about their journey. And one of the things I really like to showcase is the come up. So your name is legendary in our industry, and I've had the pleasure of knowing you over 20 years now, probably.
It's
Um,
been a long time, Leo. I've watched you, and I'm sure you've watched me, and we've both been through it and had some wins, had some losses, and that's what it's all about, right?
and I was going to say neither of us had gray when we met.
How about that? I'm trying to fight the gray. I haven't used any dye yet, but I'm using the longevity supplements to try to keep myself young.
Well, I definitely use the dye on my beard when I get a haircut. Ariana won't let me do it in the house because I make a mess. So she says, when you get your haircut, tell them to take care of it. So
I got
um,
you. I got you.
there's a tip right there. The barber will do it for you.
Got it.
But
I can't grow a beard yet, but when I get a little older and the beard comes in a little better, I'll be able to grow a good beard.
just to jump right into it, I can spout up some of your highlights, and we will on the voiceover when this is recorded completely. But um, I always like to start at the beginning, right? So you've built one of the largest independent brokerages in the country. You're on the list of the most powerful people in the real estate industry. But you've also built adjacent businesses, different businesses. You've invested in businesses. But before we unpack that stuff, take us back to whatever starting point you feel is meaningful in the story. When did you get the entrepreneurial itch, and how did you get into this crazy world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, two stories stand out for me, Leo. One was being a military son, moving all the time. One source of stability I had as a kid was my great uncle in England, and his name was Uncle Ted. And great uncle Ted was wealthy, and he was a partner in a stockbroker firm in London on the London Stock Exchange. And when my parents sent me to boarding school in England at age like 10, 11, my great uncle let us stay in his one of his properties. He had a farm, like it was 70 acres. It was gentleman's farm, as they would call it in England, but it was very higher end area, and he just let us stay in what would be called the gamekeeper's cottage, and he would have meals, and we did Christmas with him and New Year's with him and birthdays with him, and he was always the man. He was the generous patriarch of the family, and there'd be 30, 40, 50 family members or friends in a big U-shaped table, and he was on the high end table, and he would make the speeches and he would serve the food. And I remember growing up thinking, like that's a good spot. I would like to be that person. I would like to be the man that's generous, that provides for others, but also is in control. I think there's two sides to that. One is Uncle Ted was in control, and Uncle Ted was the generous patriarch, if you will, of the family. And I remember as a youngster, that made a lot of sense to me. I'm like, that's a direction I think I'd like to go. And then the second story I'll zoom you into was. Um, I was always a hard worker. I was working construction, and I came back from my second year, and I'm digging a ditch with a pitchfork, and it's a sunny day in Texas, a hot sunny day, and I'm just digging as hard and as fast as I can. And the guy beside me goes, "I see you haven't learned." And this is an older guy that I'd worked with the year before. And I remember thinking, well, what does he mean? And I sat with it a while, and obviously he meant you're still working too hard for this job. And he was saying, you got to learn to coast. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's just not who I am. That's not how I want to do it. So I left that firm and went and started my own lawn mowing company, and that was my first taste of entrepreneurialism. And when I was 17 years old and a junior in high school living at home, I made $20,000 in 1980 something, 85 maybe. And that's a lot of money back then. It's probably triple. It's probably like making 50 or 60 grand today. And for a young 17-year-old, that's a bunch of money. And those two kind of moments, like one, Uncle Ted is the example of the avatar, and then having my first business and making that kind of money is what set me on the path of like, I think I'm only ever going to work for myself.
And was that the case? Did you make a pit stop at any W-2, or did you go from mowing lawn?
Yeah, I had a job. I had a job right out of college. So I got out of college and I got a job in computer sales, door to door computer sales. And I worked there for just over a year. And I was the top salesman most months, but not every month. And it was basically a job of walking into a skyscraper and going right past the no solicitation sign and walking up to the secretary and saying, hey, I really like your dress. Who's in charge of acquisitions here? So I had this brief window. Like I always heard, if you get pulled over by a cop, if you can make them laugh in the first 15 or 20 seconds, they probably won't give you a ticket. So I had a similar experience where I'd have to walk right through that door, right past the no solicitation sign, and I had about 30 seconds to make the person there like me. And if they liked me, they would then help me find out who was in charge of purchasing. So that job was a good job, but it was intense. It was a lot of hard work. Yeah, but my boss was female, and I had the whole, the reverse Me Too movement from that experience, and so that's why I only lasted a little bit over a year there.
And then after that, did you join the family business? Did you find some mentorship outside of that? Like how did you say, okay, that was fun, but I don't think I'm wired this way?
Yeah, so then I went hitchhiking around the world. So because my best friend from college was 1 year behind me, and his family had a tradition of hitchhiking around the world for a year after college. He'd asked me to go with him multiple times, and I said, no, I want to start my career and make money. Really, I should be grateful to that boss I had for basically harassing me, which is what it was. It was undoubtedly, sexual harassment, but because she did that and I didn't have a good experience, I turned to my buddy and said, I'm going to save up all my money and I'm going to go with you. And so I quit my job and I hitchhiked around the world for 2 years. I had $20 a day. I'd saved up 7 grand, which divided by, it was supposed to be 1 year, would have been $20 a day, but I ended up falling in love and staying an extra year. So that was 2 years of just living completely by my wits, hitchhiking, figuring it out every day. We'd be in Cape Town and we'd flip a coin to see if we were going to go to Zambia or the Congo, and that's how we made our way around. And then I came back from that to America, and I was
Well,
negative fifteen
before you
hundred.
move on from that there's got to be
Yeah.
some amazing life lessons. So did you start in a particular part of the world and said we're moving east or west, up or down? Like how did that process start? Because that's probably a super unique life experience.
Yeah, so back then you could buy a round the world ticket. I don't know if you still can, but the round the world ticket enabled you to go one way all the way around the world. So it was 3 grand. So I actually had 10 grand I'd saved up. I'd sold my car and everything. Again, 10 grand back then, you have to put it in perspective, probably 20 grand a day. And I bought this round the world ticket, $3,000 one way. You could always go east. So I was always able to go east. And I started in London. And then I went east into Europe, and we spent about 90 days in Europe, which is pretty traditional, backpacking around Europe, pretty simple. And then we went down to Cape Town in South Africa, and we hitchhiked all the way up to Mozambique and Kenya. Then we went to India, and then Kathmandu, Nepal. And then because I'd met a woman that I thought I loved, was a love interest for about 9 months. I went back to South Africa and spent 9 months with her. And then when I finished, I went to Brazil and then up to the United States. I might have forgotten one or two countries on the way, but that was basically the round the world circuit. What I learned, Leo, is you don't need money to have fun. Like I had no money and I had some of the greatest times of my life. So it taught me that money isn't that important. So even though I've built a large amount of wealth, I've never been very attached to it. I love having it, but I'm not. I know that on $20 a day, I could have an amazing time. So that's what it taught me. And then, of course, a lot of resilience. There were times we were stuck in Egypt in 50 degrees centigrade, which I don't know what that is. You'd have to. I only remember the centigrade because it was 50 degrees centigrade and it was hot as hell. So that's what it is. What is 50 degrees hot as hell? And we had like no money, no food, and these kids were throwing rocks at us, and we were trying to make our way. And eventually we found this small hotel where they would let us stay for like virtually nothing. Me and my best bud were with me, and they went into this hotel room and kicked everybody out, and they moved us in. So, and I don't know what it was, like $1 to spend the night at that hotel. And we just had to ground ourselves for a minute. Um, and I just remember little things like that. I remember changing money on the black market, which is how you'd get more money, but then you get robbed. You always eventually get robbed when you're doing it on the black market. Somebody figures out how to like get your money because they'll take you in. And so, lots of little stories. Driving my car through the desert in Malawi, which we rented a car there because we wanted to spend a little extra. And you weren't supposed to drive through the desert, but we did. We drove it through the desert, and then just as we got back to the tarmac, the entire car seized up. So it was basically dead, but we were back on tarmac, so we weren't going to be in trouble with the rental company. In hindsight, they probably didn't care anyway. But then two local villagers on their bikes or biking by, they put down their bikes and they literally just pushed our car for us for like, I don't know, 30 minutes to the nearest village because we were in the middle of nowhere. So these guys just showed up, dropped their bikes, and with the generosity of heart that you rarely would see in the West or anywhere really, they just pushed our car to the village, and the head villager had the only car in town, and he drove us to Lilongwe so we would be back in the capital where we could report the car broken down. It was a Fiat, and make our way out. And then on that drive, he told us an amazing story. He said, before the colonists came, we used to share everything. We would build villages and everyone shared, and if you needed a house, we all built the house. And he said then the colonists came, or the Europeans, and they brought two ideas. One is Christianity, which was to love your neighbor as yourself, and the second was capitalism. And all of a sudden, we're taught to love each other like we already were, but in capitalism you got some people that have and some people that don't, and they don't share. So it was such an interesting perspective to be with this village elder as he kind of lectured and educated us on, the experience that some Africans have with this kind of contradiction or this paradox where we teach you to love your neighbor as yourself, and then we show up with like, yeah, this is my Mercedes, I'm sorry you can't ride in it. So or not even I'm sorry, like screw you, go get on your bicycle and drive off. And then the generosity of those two guys to just drop their bikes and literally push us. And we didn't have any money, we didn't really have anything to give them. We gave them our cookies, we had fig Newtons, but we were very poor by Western standards, but extraordinarily wealthy by African standards. And yeah, just so many lessons of life and appreciations, and you realize how hard it is for people, but how much joy they have. It's the
So
people that
I
are
gotta ask,
poor. Yeah, go.
would you encourage your kids to do that today?
It's such a hard question, right? You know, my I would be afraid for my kids to do it, but I would love for them to do it. So the answer is, especially, and this is going to sound sexist, and it is, especially my son. I'd be very terrified for my daughter to do it, just because of how life is. And if she chose to do it, I'd be excited for her, and I'd probably not sleep every night she was gone. I did meet a few women that were, rucking it around Africa, and they were a different breed. They were uniquely tough and uniquely fearless, because we're two men, and we got into some moments that were pretty interesting and nothing too dramatic, but certainly some moments that were aggressive and probably a little bit dangerous, and could have gotten a lot dangerous if one thing I've been blessed with is a high level of intuition and radar my entire life. So I kind of directed us out of multiple situations. My friend was very happy-go-lucky. He was a bigger guy, so he was tough, but he was very happy-go-lucky. He didn't see anything coming. I saw everything coming. And I don't know that I'd want my daughter to be in that circumstance. But would I really want the experience for him? Yes. And if nothing else, I'd tell him to go through Europe, because Europe's pretty safe.
Yeah, no, it's interesting being a parent now, right? Because I know a lot of your story, and you and I both lived a unique life, and we wouldn't be where we're at if we hadn't take the risks or put ourselves in these situations we put ourselves in. But as a father now, I'm like, I'm not sure I want that for them.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I'm glad I have the life I have, Leo, but I wouldn't want my kids to go through what I went through to get to the life that I have.
It's interesting paradox. And so from there, how did you go into you come back from your pilgrimage? I call parts of my journey my walkabout, right? Where I went from one industry and then kind of wandered into another one. But that you actually went through an actual walkabout slash pilgrimage. How did you come back different, right? Like, I spent 0 to 12 overseas. I actually wasn't born here. And so what, like, I had, in my experience, a elongated version of that because you come back to the States with so much context. So talk to me about that when you come back. Did you go back to Texas? How did that experience feel?
Yeah, you and I have a similar story, because I was 0 through 14 on military bases in Europe. So I left America when I was 18 months old and came back when I was 14. And you definitely appreciate America at a level that Americans generally don't when you've lived in other places. Even Germany and England, as great as they are, There's nothing quite like what we have here in the States for opportunity, for freedom, for potential. But yeah, so I came back, and my dad was living in Austin, Texas. He'd retired from the Army to Austin. He was a San Antonio boy originally, which is an hour down the road. So I come back from hitchhiking around the world. My mom's a realtor. She's doing pretty well in Keller Williams. She was Gary Keller's fifth agent, but I didn't want to work with her. I never thought real estate was a professional business. I wanted to go back into technology sales, but I had no money. So I told my mom, look, I'm going to work for you for a little bit while I go get a real job. That's literally what I told her. I was like $1,500 in debt coming back from that. My credit cards were run up. So I joined her in her on her team, and she was probably doing 750,000 GCI at that time, or I'm sorry, 400,000 GCI at the time. We did 750 within 2 years, and we were the number one team in Keller Williams. And I got into it, and I drove a buddy of mine that had graduated college around. I sold him a house, and I made $5,000. And I thought, wow, this is a pretty interesting business. It's not really that hard. The hard part is finding the clients, but once you have the clients, it's pretty straightforward. And so I kind of fell in love with the business after that. And I was my mom's partner for 3 years. And then she had also chosen to open a franchise in Dallas. And when, this is 94, 95, 96, and she had shingles from stress because it wasn't going that well up in Dallas. And I told her, Mom, I've just been hitchhiking around the world. You should sell that stuff. It's not worth it. Free, enjoy your freedom. And she had a better idea. She said, well, why don't you go up and try to run it? So I went up, and 2 years later I had shingles from stress. So she kind of threw it over to me, and I went off and jumped in and started opening franchises left and right, and eventually built the company we have today with a lot of help from some really great people, including Smokey Garrett, my current partner, because we own that together. And we it's been quite the journey, and I'm really proud of what we built, but it wasn't easy.
And so, that's the super short version. So, context: how big is that business? And then, when did you go from? Because I know your story. You went from very cash flow quadrant of self-employed to business owner to investor, right? And I think most people don't cross that chasm from employed to self-employed, and a lot of people, especially in the self-employed world, think they cross it into the business owner, but never do. And even a smaller percentage who actually figure out how to run a business and hire some people never cross over into the investor quadrant.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, Leo, because I love that. That's probably one of my favorite three books of all time would be the cash flow quadrant. And for me as a young man, it was the defining model that I wanted to live my life by. I never really was much of an employee. So I got a few jobs here and there. I wasn't a good employee. I could probably imagine in my entire life, I've probably worked 4 years for other people as an employee. But I had the lawn mowing company, which, as you know, is self-employed. It's not a business. It's an S job. And then I'm in real estate as an agent, which is also S. But then, again, I have to think I was pretty lucky in this way. My folks had bought these franchises in Dallas, and they weren't doing that well in the region. And so I went up to turn that around, and my number one job was to sell franchises. And what I found, Leo, was I'm young, I'm 27 years old. I didn't quite have the credibility to get people to buy franchises, but I could get enough agents excited to start a franchise. So even though my intention was to sell the franchise, I wasn't quite good enough at getting people to buy them, so I ended up having to buy them myself. Does that make sense? Like the job was to sell franchises, so it had to happen. I definitely had that I'm going to make it happen no matter what kind of mentality. And the only way I could figure out how to do it was to buy the franchise myself and bring some of the agents in as partners because I had no money either. So I would sell 5% to five different agents. So I'd get 75, they'd have 25%. And I'd sell them for like originally just 2,000 a share, but later we moved it up to 5,000 a share. So I'd have basically the capital I needed to start the business. I do a lot of long-term leases like you do on space. And I'd start the franchise with 10, 15, 20, later more agents. So eventually one day I have six franchises, and I'm trying to be the man for all six franchises. So I'm doing the recruiting. I have managers, but I had no idea what a talented manager looked like. I basically just hired whoever, usually an older agent that's bored of selling would become my manager, my team leader, as we call them. And then one day I got this, replacing this manager for the third time in one of my businesses because none of them are really doing anything. I used to count on them to hold people, but not necessarily. I'd be the adder because I'd have 15 appointments. I was running all over town at recruiting, and I just didn't want them to blow it and lose the relationship. Well, this one lady lost six, agents to Abby Halliday. So I'm replacing her, and this guy says, "I've got a girl, and you'll never get her. She won't come work for you, but she'd be a great manager." I'm like, "Well, let me be the judge of that. Let me have the conversation. Please just go ahead and refer me." And that led me to hiring a lady called Holly Perry. And Holly Perry came over, and she was a great manager. She was the first really talented manager. By the way, she took like a 30% pay cut to come work for me. So again, I've always had, we're selling a vision of her being the CEO of a company and developing the opportunity. And Holly started that business started doing well without me going. And at the same time, Gary Keller was teaching the Recruit Select, or Bain Henyon was teaching how to hire great people. And I began to see this correlation between that. There's one office I don't have to go to that's doing well, and it's all because of that leader. So then I switched my whole mindset, and I'm making this sound very easy. It was actually a very painful transition. Um, to where I just hired great managers and I started focusing on who's the greatest leader that I can get to come work for me. And that shift enabled me to open within, you know, sort of 10 years, I had 15 franchises. And at that time, we were, top 10 in the USA and number one in Keller Williams. And today we're number one in Keller Williams, probably top 10. I've merged with Smokey. Smokey's the CEO and runs it. And we sell 10 billion a year of real estate, 26,000 homes. We were a little bit higher before the downturn, but we're down, about 25%. So it's a good little business. That's a lot of homes and a lot of great agents that are out there selling for us, and 15 franchises. And it's still true to this day that the franchise does as well as the leader that you hire. But now we have a network of leaders so we can get multiple people to help. So here I am now, 31 years old, and I've got this aha that the way you get to the B in the business quadrant is by hiring great leaders. And my goal becomes to be the least relevant person in my organization. And so I wanted to be the least talented, the least relevant. And that's became my mission. How can I hire Tom Brady and Peyton Manning to work for me? Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Colt McCoy or Vince Young. I have to go back to Texas for analogies, but and then I found if I had a failing manager and I had a good manager, I could actually, instead of me having to deal with that failing manager, I could put them under my good manager and give them an opportunity in the other franchise. So then it built from there. And that put me fully in the B because I actually had kind of a physical breakdown at age 31 because I was trying to do so much that I couldn't keep up with it. And that's what kind of broke me from S to B. I went from self-employed where I was doing it all and just hiring mediocre managers. I kind of had a physical breakdown and shingles from stress, like I described to you. And then it became all about my people and nothing to do with me. And when you have your people doing it, you actually have a business.
The final shift, you've created enough surplus capital where I know you've invested in others. Like, and by the way, I have found that to be one of the hardest things, right? Like I can bet on myself, just like you have your whole career. It's like instead of selling is I'll just build it. But then identifying who's going to actually build a scalable business. Talk to me about how you approach investments in others.
Yeah, so once I got this concept that I can build any business if I have the right talent, so I started starting other businesses. I started a Spanish language school. I lost $1 million on it, mainly because of the downturn. I started an insurance company. We did pretty well. I started a title company. We started a mortgage company. Some did well, some did bad, but most of them made some money. And so now I've got this mindset. It's all about the person. But also in the last crash, I'd always liked buying real estate. I didn't like the stock market so much, but I liked rental income, which, by the way, if I'd never done Keller Williams, I'd have probably bought 1,000 homes in Austin. That's probably where I would have ended up because I already was starting sort of a rental portfolio, but I wasn't devoting a lot of time to it. So in 2006, I probably had six rentals. But then the crash occurs of oh 06, 07, 08. It's stressful for me. I think I was making 3.5 million net in oh 06, and by oh 08, I was making 1.8 million. Now, no one, I know you're not feeling sorry for me. No one listening to this podcast would feel sorry for me, but I felt sorry for me because I also knew I had 3 million saved up and my overhead was 700,000 a month. So I knew I had like 6 or 7 months if things went to zero. And if you remember the crash, if you lived through it, it was like the blood was running in the streets. There were no transactions. Builders were abandoning things. You couldn't sell a
I
home.
remember telling my little brother in the bottom of 9 or 10 because he was really bummed out because he was a loan officer, but he's younger than me, and he's like, "I am at 0." I was like, "I would kill to be at 0."
Yeah.
I was way in the
Yeah.
other direction. I was like -4 or 5. I'm like, "Bro, 0 is amazing. I'm jealous of," like, and I'll
Yeah.
never forget feeling jealous for someone who had 0 in the bank.
Yeah, I always told people like, you've got a job working for me as the manager, but I'm like attached to the ship. So if the ship goes down, I'm going down with it. So just to let you know, if you win and do well for me, I'll give you glory and accolades and you'll get opportunities. But if you don't do well, I'm going to be firing you and hiring someone else. And the reason is because I'm attached to that damn ship. And if it goes down, I'm going down with it because I got personal guarantees and lines and all the things I've signed. So I get it. And by the way, you don't really understand life as an entrepreneur until you've had those kind of experiences. And that's why I think we have a commonality, all entrepreneurs, because we've been through so many of those ups and downs. So then it's '09 and I've stabilized and I'm like, okay, it looks like I'm not going to lose more money. Like I'm not going further down. And when I say I'm in this, 1.8 million, I have offices that are losing hundreds of thousands, but I have some that are still making money. So blended together, I'm doing okay. But I got 4 or 5 that we had to shut down. That, I'm still got one that we have some conversations around who owes what. But we didn't do any personal guarantees on that one, so the guy's pretty limited on what he can do, but he's still trying to do something. Um, and that's where I learned also to not sign personal guarantees. So then I'm looking at the real estate market in 10 and I'm like, wow, I should start buying. So I started buying some stuff. And then in 2011, I'm like, pricing, and I'm lucky because I'm in real estate. I'm in the business every day. I've been an investor. I know it very deeply. And then I'm like, pricing is low here. Like this stuff, the rates are good, prices are low. And then by 2012, I was convinced. In fact, I was teaching my agents this could be the greatest time in your life to buy real estate. And I started teaching that class. And I bought everything I could possibly buy. And as you know, I bought about 800 single family homes. I bought $100 million worth of debt on real estate for about 70 million. And as you know, that market just from 2013 went straight back up. In fact, I was trying to build a whole business buying this distressed assets and it went away really quickly. But I was able to add enough to my portfolio that when that market came back, all this real estate I bought and then all my real estate companies, they both recovered at the same time. And so then I was like pretty wealthy. So by 2014, I was like, wow, I'm pretty wealthy. And then I joined a group called Tiger 21, which is an investment group. And I started my own company called Go Abundance, which is a training education company for for millionaires, for people that are worth $1 million. And I just started learning about investing, and I made a bunch of dumb investments and lost a bunch of money. But I also, over time, learned number one, I love real estate because I really didn't lose much money in real estate. It's very rare that you go to zero on a real estate deal unless you over leverage. I mean, you can if you leverage at 90%. I was never that guy. I was always at about 70%. And then you can also, yeah, if you have fake pro forma or somebody can lie to you, but I was always pretty good at like being skeptical. So the real estate I loved, and then I invested in like
The
startups
word
and
itself,
different.
pro forma, is a synonym for bullshit, in my opinion,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
pro
It's like
formas are so silly, man. They're like that classic car that you see in the distance. It looks amazing, but when you own it, it breaks down every week. It's really a
it's
the pro forma is such BS, and yet you've got to have one to try to make a rough judgment of a business. But yeah, then I invested in like friends businesses and startups and lost all my money, in a bunch of different things, but I also made some good ones. And I began to realize it's just like real estate. If you want to make money in real estate, you invest with the talented operators. If you want to make money in tech, you invest with the talented operators. And it's just like hiring managers. You have to do that same level of due diligence. And if your buddy's starting a company in his attic and you want to give him 50 grand, just assume you're losing that money. And if you're willing to lose that 50 grand, just go ahead and write that check. But don't write the check and then be mad that they lost the money because that's what's going to happen almost certainly.
so let me ask you this question then, because again, super common. Like what I found in real estate, no one could really bullshit me, right? And I'm talking about from a contractor who's delayed and he's like, permits are delayed. I would walk my little butt down to the courthouse and be like, no, they're not. You didn't file until yesterday, right? Like you didn't go and submit the forms until I called you. So 6-week delays. out of your cut. There's no change order, right? Um, and then I started investing stuff that I was not the operator on, and that's where what commonality. So it's a given. Yes, you invest in the operator, but how do you invest into a business that you are not kind of like you and I were effectively born and raised into the space, right? That like we'll forget more than someone can learn in 20 years type of analogy. But then like you get an opportunity that I can study stuff, but I don't have the 20 years of gut reaction or like me walking around a construction site with a tennis ball just to make sure the floors are level. I don't need an engineer. I just walk around with my tennis ball, right? Like how do you do that in tech? How do you do that in something where like title insurance, right? Like I I had a couple title insurance issues when we invested in stuff. How do you use the collective experience to then not feel like it's gambling? Because like the example you gave of giving your buddy $50,000, like that's effectively gambling. And said differently, is investing gambling? How do you minimize the downside?
It's not just gambling. Giving your buddy 50 grand is like putting your money on 17 black on the roulette table. It's almost certainly going to lose. It's like it's high risk gambling. But I learned the same thing I learned in real estate is that success leaves clues. People that have done well tend to continue to do well. It's not a guarantee, but if you find a guy that's had two exits already and they're starting a new company, well, now you may not be, you're not red and black, but maybe you're that one third bet, 1 to 12 in a roulette, you can bet one third of the table. So if they've had two exits already, they've made money on both those exits, you're now at a 30% chance of making money. And the nice thing about tech is if it does do well, you can have a 3, 5, 10, 20 to 1. And I've had a few, I've lost way more than I've won, but over time, I've developed that expertise. Like the knowledgeable people, the successful people tend to continue to be successful. I've also learned that like you want to have Sequoia or the big guys somehow around the business because they can make the business succeed. Whereas, most startups fail from a lack of capital. And they need to pivot multiple times anyway, but they run out of capital. So you want to find people that are connected to a lot of money. If you're their source of money, that's a problem. And then it's just the brightest and the best in the industry. I know I'm connected to several billionaires now. I follow them along. Like there is just like in real estate, the top agents do most of the business. Or like I don't know about you, but I got a multifamily guy that I've done 12 deals with now, and we've only lost money on one and broke even on one and made money on 10. And I trust him, and I just know when he has a new deal that he's done his due diligence. We got lost money on that one just by bad timing and a little bit of a bad luck. We had a murder on the property, which doesn't help. And so, yeah, I just trust that person now. So for my multifamily, I use that person, Andrew Cushman. And then in the tech world, I've also developed and kind of refined from a great big funnel to like a more filtered approach of being with people that I know have done it before. And so it's just like anything. It's the people more than anything, and the track record that really shows up.
Fun reaffirmment of what you just said. I ended up, raising quite a bit of capital through a couple ventures, and two parts to that comment. One is I had this huge aha when I pitched Sequoia and Founders Fund and Excel and Battery and Insight. One is I do think capital is agnostic and pure in the sense of like if you are good and you have product market fit and you have CAC and you have the right size TAM, you'll get money, right? I think there's this story in society that's like, no, you have to be connecting. No, I don't think so. I think you have to be good enough. And big money, like the ones you just mentioned, are purists. Purists. It's just like, does it work? Like, is the market big enough? Do you have a unique value proposition? What keeps a competitor from stealing your lunch? Can you go faster? What insider skill set are you bringing to the table? So that was a huge aha because and again, speaking from in my mind, I was still a realtor versus a founder of a scaled enterprise. But as I pitched these folks, I had the self awareness that I may never get an opportunity to be in front of the capital allocators of the world again. And I, after my pitch, and they kind of said yes or no. I asked them all. I said, "All right, no bullshit. what is actually what you look for that works the best? And 9 out of 10 said the exact same thing, which was fascinating. And they said third time exited founders. It was like that. It was not one, it wasn't two, it was three. It said if someone's exited twice, their third is like a 90. Like, and they're like, and it's not the 22-year-old Mark Zuckerberg. It's the 40 and 50-year-old person who probably lost money on the first one, did okay on the second one, but by the third one knows exactly what they're doing. Perfect. Well, David, it was a pleasure having you. I continue to watch sometimes from afar and sometimes closer as I bump into you and Garrett, and you guys can continue to crush it. So thank you so much for coming on.
It's a pleasure, Leo. It's great to be with you. Thanks so much.